Poplar Station on the Docklands Light Railway is an immensely busy station. For a light rail system, at least. It's the DLR's HQ. It is in fact the fourth Poplar Station, but none of the other three were here. Today, let's dive into the messy history of Poplar Station. Poplar Stations, I suppose. The station we call Poplar today is actually built more or less on the site of an earlier station, which was called Millwall Junction, even though it wasn't in Millwall, and more on that in a bit. The first Poplar station was actually about here, right next to the present-day Blackwall station. It was opened in 1840 by the London and Blackwall Railway. The line opened on the 6th of July, but according to J.E. Connor, an author and historian who is generally considered to know his stuff, it seems that it was opened a little bit later than the rest of the line. Exactly when remains unknown. It seems that it was also referred to as Brunswick Street Station, for at least part of its history. It would have been pretty basic. The London and Blackwall was very much an early railway. While there were engineers who envisaged a national network, those behind the London and Blackwall were very much not among them. The railway was built to a gauge of 5 feet, and trains were hauled by means of a cable wound by a stationary engine at the end of the line. It was incompatible with other railways. It could only carry passengers, and there was no scope for branch lines. Its purpose was to provide a route for people from the Docklands to get into London and to serve the steamer pier at Blackwall. In some ways it was more like a modern people mover than a railway. Poplar was the penultimate station along the route before Blackwall. It only lasted about 5 years. The railway directors were of the opinion that it wasn't very well situated for passengers. They also wanted Poplar Station to act as a terminus when Blackwall Pier was closed, and the current Poplar wasn't really set up for that. So a second Poplar Station was built slightly to the east under what's now the Aspen Way. It had 2 platforms and was built in a cutting, which was filled in the 1980s, so you really can't see where it was now. The Blackwall line ran into some difficulties quite early on. By the late 1840s it was no longer the only railway in the area, but it was the only one to use cable haulage and to be built to a broad gauge. It had one unique selling point. It was a railway from the heart of the docks to the City of London, with its city terminus at Fenchurch Street. They struck a deal with a new railway in town, the East and West India Docks and Birmingham Junction Railway. This railway would later rename itself the North London Railway, and that's what I'm going to call it, because who has the time to keep saying East and West India Docks and Birmingham Junction Railway? No one. No one has the time to keep saying East and West India Docks and Birmingham Junction Railway. Saying East and West India Docks and Birmingham Junction Railway is a waste of time. The deal the London and Blackwall struck was to convert their line to standard gauge and to operate using conventional locomotives and rolling stock, while allowing the North London Railway to run into Fenchurch Street, for a price, of course. In 1849 the conversion was done. They also allowed the Eastern Counties Railway over their line. In 1862 the Eastern Counties Railway would amalgamate with a bunch of other East Anglian railways and form the Great Eastern Railway, and that same year the Great Eastern would lease the London and Blackwall. Unfortunately, the London and Blackwall couldn't compete with other forms of passenger transport. Buses and later trams could provide a cheaper service. The steamer traffic that had once formed a main source of passengers had gone into decline, ironically, largely because of railway competition. In 1923, both the Great Eastern and the London and Blackwall were taken over by the London and North Eastern Railway, who don't seem to have been that interested in it, at least as far as passengers were concerned. The line east of Stepney, now Limehouse, was closed to passengers in 1926. Freight continued to operate over the line into the 1970s, but with the decline of the docks, that too went. I've said a lot about the railway, but not much about the station, because, to be honest, there wasn't that much to say. It was a simple 2-platform station that was prone to flooding. It had a number of minor upgrades over the years, and with the filling in of the cutting and the almost total redevelopment of the area, there's nothing to see. I'd like to return to the North London Railway. Another reason I point-blank refuse to say East and West India Docks and Birmingham Junction Railway under any circumstances ever is because it makes the line sound far grander than it was. Most obviously, it never went to Birmingham. In fact, it was a feeder line for the London and North Western Railway, which actually did go to Birmingham and met the North London at Willesden Junction. The purpose of it was to give the LNWR access to the extremely lucrative freight traffic from the Docklands. However, the North London Railway soon discovered that there was an equally lucrative market for commuters. Their line was kind of a semi-orbital route from Richmond in the west, round North London to the docks at Poplar, with a branch into the city at Broad Street being added later. That was a lot of communities served. So, in 1866 they added a station at Poplar. This was actually on the site of what's now All Saints Station. This was the terminus for passenger trains. Freight continued on into the docks proper. It was actually the second Poplar station that the company built. They built one slightly north in 1851, but for whatever reason they didn't open it. And for some other reason that remains unknown, they built a completely new station when they decided they needed one after all. I wish I had enough money to just throw stations away. The 1866 Poplar was generally known as Poplar East India Road, presumably to avoid confusion with the Blackwall Line station. It was a fairly substantial station which catered to commuters in both directions, city dwellers working in the docks and East Enders working in the city. Unfortunately, the early 20th century did a number on the North London Railway's passenger traffic just as it had done to the London and Blackwalls. Trams, buses and tube trains siphoned passengers off. This Poplar station managed to limp on for longer than its Blackwall colleague. But it was the Second World War that finally did for it. The docks were naturally a target for bombing, and Poplar East India Road was hit no fewer than 4 times. The last 2 hits in 1944 damaged the station so severely that the company decided to cut their losses and close it. Officially it closed in 1945, but no trains had called there since the bombing. And that brings us to the present-day Poplar. Kind of. In 1871, a new railway was opened, the Millwall Extension Railway. This was a line that ran from Poplar, past the Millwall docks, to North Greenwich. North Greenwich is a bit of a misnomer as it's on the opposite side of the river to Greenwich. As railways go, it wasn't much of one. 3-coach trains hauled by tiny locomotives over a distance of about 1.5 miles. But it joined the London and Blackwall main line, and so, in 1871, Millwall Junction Station was built. There had been an idea of building a station here back in 1845, but it wasn't until the new line was built that it was considered justifiable. If the Millwall Extension Railway wasn't much of a line, Millwall Junction wasn't much of a station. There was no grand station building, no porters, not even any ticket inspectors. The entrance was via a footbridge. And actually you can still see where it was if you know what you're looking for. The way in was here on Harrow Lane, and you can still see that some of the brickwork is newer than the rest. That's where the entrance was. Passengers weren't really a priority here. Really, the main purpose of the junction was goods, and the station was a tiny part of an enormous network of sidings used for wagons. The North London Railway and the Great Eastern Railway both had marshalling yards here. Other companies, including the Great Western, the Great Northern, and the Midland Railways, all had depots here too. I imagine the little Millwall Extension Railway trains being dwarfed by rows of coal trucks and banana vans. Millwall Junction did get rebuilt in 1885 with a brick-built building with some decent passenger facilities. You know, toilets and such like. However, 1926 saw the closure of not only the London and Blackwall to passengers, but the Millwall Extension Railway as well. Millwall Junction kept going for 1 year more as a goods station before closing altogether in 1927. It remained as a ghost station until 1965 when the building was knocked down. The platforms remained intact until they were demolished to make way for the new kid in town, the DLR. The docks were run down from the 1960s onwards as shipping moved downriver to Tilbury. There was little economic motivation to do anything with these old railway lines, and so they lay abandoned for years. Which turned out to be for the best, because it meant that they could effectively be reopened as the Docklands Light Railway. The line into Minories, now Tower Gateway, the North London Railway route to Stratford, and the Millwall Extension Railway were all ripe to be converted to light rail. It was perfect. Better still, it was cheap. And so, in 1987, the first part of what was to become the Docklands Light Railway was opened. As those three initial lines had all met at Millwall Junction, and there was still a huge mess of abandoned railway land, it was a no-brainer to put the hub of the system here. The depot, the workshop, the administrative headquarters, and of course a station, which is the 7th station we've talked about here, not counting All Saints or Blackwall. The maintenance facilities were fairly minimal. Actually, the edition of the Docklands Light Railway Handbook from before the line opened describes this as thrifty. A cynic might say cheap. The idea was that heavy overhauls would be done elsewhere. Like the old Millwall Junction, the station itself is slightly awkwardly located, not super easy to reach from basically anywhere, and to be honest, wherever you are in the Docklands, there's probably another DLR station that's easier to reach. It's most useful as an interchange. The DLR network has vastly increased since 1987, and Poplar has gone from the hub to merely a hub. There are several more lines now, and in many cases they too recycle old route alignments. I think it's interesting that these were unloved lines and underused stations, and now they're not only well patronised, but they've driven regeneration in the area. I guess you could say that Poplar has become popular. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please do leave a like and consider subscribing for more. Today's main sources were all stations to Poplar, Stepney's own railway, and London's disused railway stations, the East End, all by J.E. Connor, the Blackwall and Millwall Extension Railways by Geoffrey Body, and the Docklands Light Railway Handbook by Stephen Jolly and Bob Bayman. I would like as ever to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the Millwall Extension Railway to my planned station at Harrow Lane. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.
The next train